Howdy, guys. This is Dr. Van Meter, and this is my very first attempt at a video lesson. This week's assignment, I want to be a two-paragraph analysis of the story Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. I'm going to make a couple of preliminary comments about it, and then I'm going to shut myself off and show you my screen. All right, so this is a story that in many ways bears witness to one of my teaching obsessions, and that is trying to get students to understand that there's a lot more going on in a story than just what appears on the surface level. And so you'll remember this from class, I hope, and that is our model, our interpretive model. And that is this triangle represents the text, and those three layers represent the levels of meaning in a text. And so we'll revisit this after we look at the story and then see how it works, or review how it works. All right, so what I want to do is I want to play an audio of the story, Jamaica Kincaid herself reading the story to an audience. And then I'm going to project the story on screen, and we'll just scroll through it as Jamaica Kincaid is reading it. So let's just go ahead and get straight to that. So here is the text. And if you want to find the audio, it's on YouTube. Just type in, Jamaica Kincaid and Girl, and it will pop up. So I'm going to go ahead and start the audio and then go back to the text and scroll the text as she's reading it.
And it goes like this. Wash the white clothes on Monday and put them on the stone heap. Wash the color clothes on Tuesday and put them on the clothesline to dry. Don't walk barehead in the hot sun. Cook pumpkin fritters in very hot, sweet oil. Soak your little cloths right after you take them off. When buying cotton to make yourself a nice blouse, be sure that it doesn't have gum on it, because that way it won't hold up well after a wash. Soak saltfish overnight before you cook it. Is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? Always eat your food in such a way that it won't turn someone else's stomach. On Sundays, try to walk like a lady and not like the slut you are so bent on becoming. Don't sing Benna in Sunday school. You mustn't speak to wharf rat boys, not even to give directions. Don't eat fruits on the street. Flies will follow you. But I don't sing Benna on Sundays at all, and never in Sunday school. This is how to sew on a button. This is how to make a buttonhole for the button you have just sewed on. This is how to hem a dress when you see the hem coming down, and so to prevent yourself from looking like the slut I know you are so bent on becoming. This is how you iron your father's khaki shirt so that it doesn't have a crease. This is how you iron your father's khaki pants so that they don't have a crease. This is how you grow okra far from the house, because okra tree harbors red ants. When you are growing dasheen, make sure it gets plenty of water, or else it makes your throat itch when you are eating it. This is how you sweep a corner. This is how you sweep a whole house. This is how you sweep a yard. This is how you smile to someone you don't like too much. This is how you smile to someone you don't like at all. This is how you smile to someone you like completely. This is how you set a table for tea. This is how you set a table for dinner. This is how you set a table for dinner with an important guest. This is how you set a table for lunch. This is how you set a table for breakfast. This is how to behave in the presence of men who don't know you very well, and this way they won't recognize immediately the slut I have warned you against becoming. Be sure to wash every day, even if it is with your own spit. Don't squat down to play marbles. You are not a boy, you know. Don't pick people's flowers, you might catch something. Don't throw stones at blackbirds because it might not be a blackbird at all. This is how to make a bread pudding. This is how to make dukuna. This is how to make pepper pot. This is how to make a good medicine for a cold. This is how to make a good medicine to throw away a child before it even becomes a child. This is how to catch a fish. This is how to throw back a fish you don't like. And that way, something bad won't fall on you. This is how to bully a man. This is how a man bullies you. This is how to love a man. And if this doesn't work, there are other ways. And if they don't work, don't feel too bad about giving up. This is how to spit up in the air if you feel like it, and this is how to move quick so that it doesn't fall on you. This is how to make ends meet. Always squeeze bread to make sure it's fresh. But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread? You mean to say that after all, you're really going to be the kind of woman who the baker won't let near the bread?
Okay, so there is the story. And if we go back to our model, you will see, well, I hope to show you how this model works. So I think that in the future, I'm going to have students read The Story of an Hour on the first day of class, and then this story on the second day of class. Because this, probably better than any story I know, girl that is, shows you just how well this model works, I think, and more importantly, shows you how just because something is brief doesn't mean it's not absolutely jam-packed full of information. So anyway, so on the literal level, like I said before, the fancy Greek word for the literal level is diegetic, which comes from the Greek word diegesis, which basically means story. On the literal level of girl, you just have the voices of two people. And the second person is the girl from the title. And she only says two things. And it's not clear whether she actually says them or just thinks them. All right, so who is the first voice? Who is the person who is speaking? You don't know. All you know is it's someone giving instructions to someone else. What do you think is the gender of the person who is speaking? It is a woman. What is the relationship between the woman and the girl? Well, you can probably infer what that relationship is because that woman is giving a list of instructions to the girl. Now, by the way, if you go to the internet and you look up, stuff like Cliff's Notes or Spark Notes, they universally conclude that the woman who is speaking is the girl's mother, which may be true, but there's no indication in the story that that's true. Now, if it is true, the story is far more horrifying than if it is not true. And I'll get into that later. So on the literal level, all you have is a list of instructions. The end. So I do want to say one more thing about that, and that is what kind of instructions is the narrator giving to the girl? And these instructions are domestic chores. So what can you conclude about the narrator? Their narrator is a domestic servant and probably in some sort of supervisory position who is giving instructions to a girl. Okay, the title implies that she is young. And there are clues in the text that suggest that she is a teenager, probably a young teenager. And the younger she is, the more horrifying the story becomes, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, so that's it. Okay. Uh, supervisory woman giving instructions to a young girl. That's the only thing that's going on the literal level. All right, but as you can assume, there is much, much more going on in this story than merely a list of instructions. All right, now to get there, you have to get to beneath that literal level. And we have to get to the allegorical and symbolic level, but even at that level, it is not as significant or meaningful as that deepest level, the political and the historical. But let's go ahead and stop here on the allegorical level and talk about it. The first thing is that um, whenever you think about a story, the main character is called the subject. So if you go back to A Raisin in the Sun, for example, the subject is Walter Lee Younger. It is a story about Walter Lee Younger. So who is the subject in the story? Well, the title of the story suggests that the subject is the girl, although you only hear her speak or think twice. So it may be that the subject is the girl, is the supervisor. In which case, who is she? You don't know. Okay. All you know about her is that she's the one who's talking, and she appears to be in some sort of supervisory position. Who is the girl? Okay. You might say that she is the subject. She is young. She is a novice. She is the person that instructions are given to. So she's not experienced. And experienced is a very important word when considering what this story is actually doing. All right. And another thing to consider is that in the history of literature, stories about girls are actually pretty rare, making up far fewer than 10% of all stories. So the fact that it is about a girl is in many ways maybe disorienting to a lot of to a lot of students. Not to girls, by the way. To women, they're used to reading stories about women and girls, but boys tend to be a little anxious about stories about girls. I don't really want to get into that right now, but it's a thing. Men and boys seem to be resistant to reading stories about girls or watching movies about girls. Anyway, back to the story. So if you think about this from an allegorical perspective, the girl represents what? She represents girls. And what is a girl's destiny? For most of human history, that woman's destiny is to get married, to have children, and to be basically a domestic servant, the property of her husband. The end. Okay, so this story does do some interesting things with that allegorical and symbolic level. Okay, now to get to what's really going on in the story, though, you have to go much deeper into the text, and that is to that political and historical level. And knowing who writes is crucially important, and when that person writes, also a crucial piece of information. Jamaica Kincaid is a Caribbean and Caribbean/American author born in 1949, and she was from Antigua, a Caribbean island. And we can conclude from clues in the story that this is a story that is set in the Caribbean. Words like Dukana and Bena are terms that are geographically specific to the Caribbean. Bena is a type of folk music in the Caribbean, something along the lines of reggae, for example. All right, now the Caribbean. This is a story that is in the English language. It was written by a Caribbean author. Now, how long has English been the official language of Antigua? Well, historically speaking, not very long. Why do they speak English in Antigua? Antigua was a British colony. And so when the British landed on Antigua, I don't know the dates, I apologize for that. When the British landed on Antigua and claimed it for the crown, the natives who lived there, they didn't speak English, they spoke their own language. However, once England claimed Antigua, this is the process known as colonialism, they forbade the people who lived there from using their own language. So English was imposed on them. And just by way of comparison, how would you feel if someone moved into your house and said, now it's my house and I own it and you have to speak my language. And everything that you have now belongs to me. That's colonialism. In the middle of the 20th century, these colonial nations started rebelling, and that began the period known as post-colonialism. And that is when all those nations managed to expel these European nations and they gained their independence. But just because they gained their independence didn't mean that they all of a sudden found themselves independent and what's the word I'm looking for? Sovereign nations. Those colonizing nations still have very strong presences there, and most of those areas, lands, were still owned by the colonizing nations. And so you actually can detect all these things in the story because what do the two females in the story do? They're domestic servants. Whom do they work for? They work for someone that the woman calls the father. Well, who is this father? Is it their father? Well, as it turns out, in the Caribbean, father is a term that they use in the same way that slaves in America used to describe their landowners, and that was master. So in America, they would say master, but in the Caribbean, they would say father. So father is the term that the domestic servants would use to describe the landowner. So now let's get into some of the more distressing things that you're going to see materialize in this story. Now, what you might have noticed is something that was really kind of weird to me and still remains weird to me in the audio version, because you have Kincaid reading the story, and then you get to the part of the story let's go to the story itself here, where she says, right here, always eat your food in such a way that it won't turn someone else's stomach. On Sundays, try to walk like a lady and not like the slut you are so bent on becoming. Okay, now what you might have experienced as you were reading this was like, whoa, this came out of nowhere. What is going on? And then the thing that was really freaky to me about the audio was that the whole audience laughed when Kincaid wrote that. But if you think about the implications of that, that is really, it's really bizarre and really kind of turns my stomach in a way, especially when you consider about the implications of that. That is, let's say that the narrator is the mother of the girl. How would you, okay, so I'm not speaking to you guys here. I'm speaking to you girls here, and that is, how would you feel if your mother said that to you? Try to walk like a lady and not like the slut you are so bent on becoming. Uh, has your mother ever said anything like that to you? Furthermore, and this is why it's so distressing to me, the audience reaction, do you have any indication from the story that the girl is bent on becoming a slut? And, well, the answer is clearly no. Evidence one, she goes to Sunday school. All right. Furthermore, she doesn't sing Benna in Sunday school. So this is a good girl. So she is not bent on becoming a slut. So why would the narrator say that she is bent on becoming a slut? Well, we'll talk more about that in a minute. No, let's not wait for that. Let's talk about it now. And that is, what is it that the colonizers did when they claimed the land for their colonizing nation? For example, what did England do when it landed on the shores of Antigua and claimed Antigua for the crown? Well, they enslaved the entire population, and they seized all their property and their natural resources, and they raped all the women. That is the history of colonialism. Okay. And so what happens in the aftermath of that? What happens to women when they are raped? Well, let's go down to and I think it is 3 times in the story where the narrator says something along the lines of, you are bent on becoming a slut. Even though we now know that the girl is not bent on becoming a slut. Now we get to the most, perhaps the most disturbing part of the story, and that is where where the narrator is giving the girl cooking instructions. This is how to make dukana. This is how to make pepper pot. This is how to make a good medicine for a cold. This is how to make a good medicine to throw away a child before it even becomes a child. Now that is the moment where hopefully you were reading that and you went something like, oh, what just happened? Why would the narrator give that piece of information to the girl? Why would she say that? Okay, well, let's go back. What I hope is that as we've gone through this, some things are starting to materialize in your mind, some suspicions that you have. Kincaid knows that. She has inserted these clues into the story to kind of give you an idea of what's really going on in colonialism. Even though this story is set after colonialism, in the post-colonial age. Although, even that might not be true. Are there any clues as to when this story takes place? I mean, it could be 100 years ago. It could be 200 years ago. It could be 20 years ago. This story was written in 1978. So it is a technically post-colonial story. But there are no signs in the story that give away its time period. And I think that's by design. Kincaid deliberately withholds clues from you to sort of give you to make a challenge for you to figure out what's going on. All right, now let's get to the real horror of the story, and that is, let's say that the woman speaking is the girl's mother. Okay, what is the relationship that she had with the, quote, father, unquote? What is it that masters did to their slaves? Uh, well, if you know anything about the history of American slavery, it was unrepentant, unremitting, and relentless sexual violence against women. And what would often happen, often, happened all the time. What would happen is that those women would get pregnant and they would have children by the masters. So, if you think about the implications of the word father, okay, it is perhaps implied that the father is the father of the girl. So not just father meaning master, but also father meaning literal father. And if you want to dig deeper than that, who is the father of the narrator? All right, so there is how you go deep into a text, into the political and historical level. All right. So, anyway, to kind of wrap it up, you have to ask yourself, what is it that Kincaid is doing? What's her agenda? Why did she write this story? What is she arguing? And so I want to give you a couple of ideas. One is that one of the ways that a colonizer was able to recruit the colonized, that is the natives who were already there, how were they able to get them to submit to the process of colonialism? All right. How were they able to recruit them into this system? Because the narrator is not rebelling against the system. What the narrator is doing is trying to give tools to the girl to help her survive. Okay, but the narrator is not being honest with the girl. Okay, what the narrator is hinting to the girl is, you are going to get raped. But what happens to girls who are raped? What are they called? They're called sluts. So anyway, to get to the rhetoric of the story, what it is that Kincaid is arguing, I mean, on the most obvious level, she's arguing about the long-term catastrophic consequences of colonialism. And that is, let's say this story takes place in the post-colonial world, the implication is it's still going on. And even more disturbingly, that the natives themselves are kind of defeated by the system, not because you don't see the narrator rebelling against it. But you know who is rebelling against it? Jamaica Kincaid is rebelling against it. Okay, this is a story of protest, not just against the historical violence directed towards women in the colonized world, but the fact of its persistence and how the population seems to be in the business of keeping secrets rather than getting it out in the open so that the process can end. All right, so give me 2 paragraphs on girl, and looking forward to reading them. Have a great day. I'll talk to you later.